Ladies and gentlemen, today is March 22nd, 2016, and this is the KNKL Show, episode 286, where we learn to be better artists. My name is Kienan Lafferty, and I would like to welcome you to another show. Today we are going to be focusing on improving as an artist, and what does that actually mean? Well, we'll get into that in just a second, but before we get into today's topic, take a stroll down the lovely lane because you guys have been being awesome. If you'd like to go check out all these pieces for yourself, type in that tiny URL /KNKL fan art, go like the page, submit your art, get featured on the show, and I hear there's like cookies or something. You should definitely go do that. All right. So today is a very special episode because we have a question coming in from the KNKL IMSI. And what is the KNKL IMSI? Well, for those of you who didn't see the last video that I just released, starting a new community on imsi.com. And if you'd like to, you can go here, imsi.com/KNKL, place where you can submit questions like this amazing one right here, and suggestions for the show, as well as more art. And it's a better chance for us to communicate as a community. I like it better than Facebook for submitting questions and all that stuff. So if you've always wanted to bring the question catapult back, now's the chance to do it. And our first question is coming in from Yoko MJ. And he or she asks, so improvement, sorry Yoko if you're a woman, it's the topic you covered before, surely, but I was wondering, what do you do when you feel your work can be improved upon? What are the things you decide to practice, and how do you go about it? Do you dive in head first or study before you practice? Okay, so this question totally just boggled my mind. It stuck in there and it made me think, and I was like, how do I know that I've improved as an artist? How do I get past those points where I'm in a slump, or even better yet, where's concrete evidence that I am improving? And this totally got me excited to do something new. And that is, I decided to open up one of my old pieces right here. And you guys might recognize this. This is LeBlanc from 2011. And what I did was I just took some time to go in and do some overpainting. And I asked myself, what would I do if I were painting this today? Or how can I bring this up to my current skill level? So I went from here to here. And this is the project for today's episode. This is what we're going to be talking about today. And I did time-lapse it because I'm really smart. We're going to be talking about the differences between going from here to here. Because what's really interesting, guys, is if you look at both of these, there's actually not too big of a difference. Yes, it looks nicer, but actually there's just a lot of tiny subtleties that have all added up to bring it to a new finish, a new skill level. So this is my answer to you, Yoko, that if you're feeling that you need to you want some concrete evidence that you're improving, pull up one of your old pieces and draw it again. Or better yet, if it's a digital piece, paint over it with all the things that you've learned, and then just flip back and forth, and you will see the improvement. So let's go ahead and get into the time lapse, and let's talk about these things one by one, because I'm going to dissect this stuff. I'm going to dissect this for you one by one. And the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is, so let's go back to right here, because you'll see me starting to do this immediately. So back when I was working in this type of style, I used to rely very heavily on my line art to kind of keep my values. For example, this line underneath this lip and the line that goes up between the nose and the lips, right? Those would represent my shadows. But what I learned over the last 5 years was that there's a way to still convey lines with differences in value. So watch as I go through here and I paint out the lines, but I still retain them by just having a difference in my values. And that is a fancy way of saying just a contrast between the lights and the darks, the light parts and the dark parts, and the colors and all that stuff. So I'm going through and I'm just repainting everything, trying to get rid of all of those lines, allowing the contrast. See, here's a good example of it. There used to be a line for this lip, but now I'm allowing the contrast between the lightness of the skin on the upper part and then the darkness of the lip on the under part to create that line, as opposed to having a black line between and then pink on this side and then light pink on the other. So continuing, and you'll see me do that throughout the whole thing. That's probably the biggest difference that of things that I have learned today. And I'll show you guys how to do that real time in just a moment. Show you guys how to do that in just a moment. Actually, I can show you right now. Why not? Why not? Because we're dissecting this thing one by one. Okay, so let's go back to this old one. And I'll demonstrate exactly what I did. So see right here with this lip, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So before I used to create a line, between my two pieces, right? And I would have pink here and then light pink here. But see how this line is right in between? We want to get rid of that. We want to get rid of that. And I found out that you can do that actually just by blending the line. You can blend this line right into, like sometimes I'll just eyedrop it like that, and I'll blend it right into the bottom part of the lip. I'll blend it right into the bottom part of the lip, making it darker. Sometimes I'll go into my color picker and saturate a little bit to kind of simulate a little bit of subsurface scattering. Kind of drop that in there. And then just kind of blend it. Blend it all into a shape. And then allow the difference in the contrast. See, now we have that contrast between these two parts to create our line. Okay, so there's step one. Let's go ahead and move into the rest of this. Let's continue. Same thing is happening throughout here. I also kind of warped the face with the liquify tool. That's another, I'm a big fan of the liquify tool. I used to try to stay away from it because I was like, no, I'm a digital artist. I can't use digital tools like liquify. I can't rearrange this face to make it look right. I have to be able to draw it perfectly the first time, right? But of course, you know, there's a stigma attached to it, but you know what? Just drop the freaking stigma. It's like, you're a digital artist. Your boss doesn't care how it gets done. The only thing he cares is that it's done. So whatever you can do to make your art better, you don't have to use just a hard round brush. You don't have to stay away from any custom brushes. You don't have to stay away from the liquify tool. Use everything that is at your disposal. Use everything. Okay, so now we're moving it into just a little bit more kind of cleaning things up. Okay, and this brings us to our next thing that I want to talk about. And that is, not that. It is values. Values, my friends. So take a look here. So if you go back and forth between these two, do you notice how LeBlanc's head, specifically around this area, is now much more clear? The silhouette of her head is much more clear. Whereas here, if you squint your eyes, you can't really tell where the inside of her collar is and where her hair begins. And this has to do with values, ladies and gentlemen. Another thing that I learned, which is very important. And that is, similar to what we just did with the lip and the skin, if you want to show areas, or if you want to show the edge of an area, you have to lighten it up. And the way that you're going to lighten it up is by changing the value. Okay, so what I did was I went in here, and I actually just lightened this value. I said, okay, well, let's just say that this area back here is a little bit more distorted by the atmosphere. That's actually more so what is represented here. As things go further back, there's a little bit more atmospheric distortion, right? So you can make it a little bit lighter. So I said, let's heighten the contrast between the edge of her hair and the back of her collar thingy, right? And mixed in a little bit. I think I actually mixed in a little bit of gold too, because her in-game model, the inside is actually gold. I don't know why I painted it purple at first. So that was another reason why I can make it lighter. Okay, so I just went through there and said, oh, okay, look at that. Now we have nicer contrast, nicer contrast. Now we can see the edge of her hair and the edge of the collar. Okay, so that's values, ladies and gentlemen. Another very important thing, which brings clarity to your piece. Clarity to your piece. Okay, let's continue. Let's continue. Okay, doing a little more warpage, a little more liquify tool, putting some liquid liner on her lips to make them look extra shiny. Also, another thing that I did is a unified and consistent light source, which was before, I don't know exactly what I was doing with this light source. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at light sources, ladies and gentlemen. New layer here, and let's discuss lights. Okay, so if you look at this picture, can you tell me where the light is actually coming from? Can you tell me where it's coming from? Well, I guess if we look at the face, because all the speculars are facing directly at us, right? And I've taught you guys this before. When the speculars are all on planes that are even with your eyes, that means that there is a frontal light happening. The light is basically coming from the viewer and facing onto LeBlanc. But here's the problem with that. Here's the major problem with that, is that where the heck is this light coming from? Where's the light that's affecting this coming from? Is it coming from up top? You know, well, maybe. But then where's the light that's coming from the front? Because we should be seeing more light happening in this area, and in this area, and in that area. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we did there. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. So now see what we've done here. We put more lights on the frontal parts, the parts that are facing us, and we've darkened the top part, right? So this has to do with consistent lighting, consistent lighting. Now you can have more than one light source, but make sure that you have a primary and then sort of like a secondary or a reflected light. Whereas here, it was kind of hard to tell exactly what the heck was going on. It was like there's a light kind of up top and then front and everything. It just wasn't consistent. So when you have a consistent light source, everything coming from the front, I really like to light my characters like this because it's like super easy, just makes things look really nice. Frontal light source, consistent, you have a good time with that. All right, the second thing that we want to talk about, and it happened in the same point of the time lapse. Let me see if I'm actually working on that right now. Okay, so these little things right here, the little clips that hold her cape on that attach to her shoulder, I actually added in this little piece right there to make it look a little bit more, I mean, as amazingly practical as this suit is for battle, we need to make sure that it can actually like hold on that giant cape. So we need a little bit more reinforcement going underneath that arm there. So I kind of brought that down. But even more importantly, I fixed the boobs, right? Because before, check it out. So actually, here's the interesting thing. This is a common problem that I would do. This is a common problem that I would do, and maybe you at home do this too. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so, and this is going to be the best part of the tutorial right here. I know this is why you showed up. Okay, so with the boobs, with this costume, I want you to imagine the center point of this boob. Okay, so there's the center point right there, right? Like that. And then do you see how this part is kind of going up this way? Do you see how this part of the costume is going up and covering like that? But now let's do that on the other side. Here's the center point of the boob right there. And then where is the center point here? It's actually right there. But see what the problem is that this part, see how much more this is actually covering, this area right here? We needed to actually bring that down a little bit more. We needed to bring it down a little bit more, right? And this is just a really subtle thing, but like painting that in, it just makes it more, like that's how it would actually look in perspective. And it actually creates a little bit better flow. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's take a look at the differences there. So see how I kind of rounded that a little bit more to make it, this is just an issue of perspective, right? And I would always be a little bit too, at least in the picture before, I wasn't playing it up enough. I wasn't showing enough skin, strangely enough, right? So we kind of covered it up here. We covered it up on the armpit, and to make up for that, we showed a little bit more of the boob, right? But more importantly, that is the proper perspective, ladies and gentlemen. So there you go. There you go. Let's move on to the next part. Next part. All right. Oh, yeah, and that's going to be the ellipses. I learned about ellipses while I was working at Riot, and it was clear that I did not know what the heck I was doing back when I originally did this LeBlanc piece. I mean, it was okay, and I'm talking about the elliptical thing on her shoulder. And you can see that I've already laid in the shape, the proper shape here. And let's go ahead and talk about that. Let's go ahead and talk about that now. So before, I want you guys to look at this. So let's go ahead and make some new notes here. So take a look at this ellipse, okay? So if we look at this ellipse, because of everything that we've learned about ellipses in perspective, right? And that is that whatever way, like say this is your perspective and here's your vanishing point, whichever way your ellipse is facing, right? So say your ellipse is like this when you're looking straight at it, but as it begins to turn away from you, it starts to do one of these things, right? This is how your ellipses look. But notice how the outer edges of this line up perfectly with the direction of your perspective, right? And if we look at this ellipse, where is this perspective pointing us? Where is it pointing us? It's pointing us in this direction, which is kind of correct. It's kind of correct. It should actually be a little bit more like this. It should be more this way, right? It should be more this way because that ellipse needs to be resting more so on her chest, right? And the chest plane, like here's her shoulder, kind of coming up like this. And if that ellipse was resting on her shoulder and going down the chest, it would be more in this type of shape. It would be more like that. So that's why we went from there to there. See how now that looks like it's laying down flat on top? It looks like it's part of the plane or it's going at the same angle as her chest there. That's because of perspective, ladies and gentlemen, and ellipses. Oh, and also, another thing, definitely check this out. See, this one, also, look at the perspective that this one is going on. This is the perspective line here, and then the ellipse is right there. I didn't even draw that in the other one, right? I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't draw the other edge of the cape. I added that in this piece, and I think it was a great addition. It was a great addition because it also allowed us to kind of balance out our composition. Before, our composition was kind of just like this giant shape kind of sticking in, right? And then you have all this negative space, right? Negative space all over the character. But here, it's a little bit more divided. It feels a little bit more balanced because now you have this shape and then you have this negative space. I really like that a lot more. Plus, we got to add in that other side of the cape and then kind of draw that out. It flows so much better. I was always already a big fan of this area, how it flowed like that. Just really framed the facial area really well. But adding this shape in or adding that line in really helps to, again, lead your eyes up to the proper focal points. So let's go ahead and continue. Let's continue. All right, back to LeBlanquis. So I think what I'm doing here is I am just adjusting things like, say, the eyebrows. I'm going in and making tiny little adjustments to the face. And this has to do with little things that I've just learned over the course of the 5 years. And that is like, let me show you guys here. So this is, I love that we're jumping back and forth so much today. This is really great. Okay. So you guys are getting a mouthful today. You guys are getting, hopefully I'm not blowing your brains up by freaking talking about all this stuff. Okay, so something very important that I learned with facial anatomy is that I always had a tendency to do two things. One is I had a tendency to have this eye kind of sticking out a little bit too far. It would always get sucked to the side of the face too much. It would be kind of ending up in this danger zone, right? You want to have enough space. You want to have plenty of space between the ear, what would be the ear, and the eye, right? But also, more importantly, is that I was forgetting about the depth of the face. See how I draw this line in right here? This represents the nose and the cheek going back to your tear duct. But then once it reaches that point, your brow comes out and then it goes up like this, right? So if we were to draw it up like that, see, interesting. But now I want you to look at this line. Look at this line right here on the left side. Do you see how that line goes directly with the eyebrow? Yet on this side, the eyebrow is a little bit too far to the right. So something that I just did in the time lapse was I moved the eyebrow. I had a tendency to not make the eyebrow move over to the side enough. So rather, the eyebrow should have looked more like this rather than that. See how I just moved it over a tiny bit? This helps to reinforce the depth of the face and the planes of the face. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out and just pay attention to what happens with these eyebrows. So I just moved it up a little bit. Very, very slightly just moved that face and the eyebrow forward a little bit. It gives it a little bit more depth. Again, you might look at it and be like, that is literally like the difference of like 3 pixels. But it's a big deal, people. Lots of tiny, subtle things adding up, adding up. And that's what you learn over years. It's not some giant new technique that you learn like, oh, now I'm a good artist. Now I'm a good artist. No, it's tiny little things every single day that you'll learn. And then over 5 years, you look back and you're like, oh man, there's all these tiny things that I know how to do better now. Let's go ahead and add those to an old picture, and then you will see the improvement. You will see the improvement. Alrighty then. So, but this picture was just such a blast to work on. I loved it. It was so fun revisiting an old piece and just doing the flipping back and forth. You can see it going back in hyperspeed. Just me flipping back and forth. I'm just like, man, this is crazy. And then I remember where I was when I did the original piece and like all of the like preconceived notions that I had about like art and like what I was learning at that time and what I thought looked good and because it's really funny. Like when I finished that LeBlanc piece, I was like, this is one of the best pieces I've ever done. It's just so good. It's so amazing, and that is okay, right? You're always going to be improving. And sure enough, I'll look back 5 more years from now and I'll look at this and I'll be like, yeah, this is pretty good, but I've learned even more since then. And that's why, as Yoko said it is the unending struggle of the artist. You will always be improving. You will always be learning things. And you'll always take 5 years and look back and you'll be like, I don't know what the heck I was doing, right? But it's all about that improvement. So, good times, good times. All right, so we're going to be finishing up this time lapse. Then we're going to be ending it today. And then for those of you who want to check out this PSD, it will be on the Patreon, so don't worry. You can go through all the layers and take a look at how I slowly built it up and changed it from the old piece. And but we'll get into that in just a moment. Okay, another really important part was I learned how belts worked. Because here, this is not how a belt works. The belt's on our arms, specifically. A belt does not work this way, okay? So let me show you how a belt works. Okay, a belt works like this. So basically, you have a strap, okay? Really easy. And then from that strap, you'll have a buckle, okay? Buckle like this, and then it goes across. And then on top of that, you have a little needle that sticks through the holes of the belt, okay? Now, here's the cool part. Here's where it gets a little tricky. So whichever way the needle is pointing, right? The opposite way, that's where the belt had to run through, right? So the belt is running the opposite way, okay? And then once it goes through that needle, it's gonna get tucked into a loop. Sometimes belts, fancy belts have 2 loops. 2 loops, and then you'll have the end of the belt. You will have the end of the belt, which I have shown by creating this little shape here. But what's interesting is that a lot of people forget that the other side of the belt, the under part of the belt, continues on the other side. So technically you have 2 layers here. You have an upper part, which is this here. And then you have a lower part. Which is this red part right here. It goes all the way, and it actually attaches to the belt. It attaches to the buckle right here, okay? So from this point on, you should have 2 layers. 2 layers. I love that I'm explaining how to draw belts properly, okay? So let's take a look at that. Let's translate that over. I know I've blurred it here. Oh, I have an unblurred version because I'm awesome. Okay, so take a look here. Same thing. See that little needle that's poking through? The opposite way is where the belt goes. And see how we can see that second layer right underneath there? Second layer right underneath there going under. And then we have the end of the buckle and the loop that it goes through. And that is how belts work, ladies and gentlemen. All righty then. Let's finish this up. Let's finish it up. Oh, and of course I did the most important thing. I took her head thing that was before like screwed into her forehead, and I finally like popped it off, and I made it magically float in front of her forehead, as it should, because I don't know how that giant headdress actually sticks on her head. Even if there was a headband, it would have to like be made out of solid steel to hold up that much gold, right? That much friggin' weight. So anyway, I just decided, it's gonna be magic. I'm just gonna take it, I'm gonna lasso it, put it out there, and then just repaint everything underneath it. So this is actually pretty interesting how this goes down. So, oh, whoops, of course I skipped it. So let's see here. Okay, so watch how I go about repainting everything underneath here. See? Super easy. Very, very cool. So now it is magically floating off the top of her forehead. No longer screwed into her brain. Although, I haven't seen a lot of... Do people even play this character anymore? I haven't seen LeBlanc in League of Legends in a long time. I guess she got nerfed into the ground, so a lot of people don't really even know she exists anymore. But whatever, maybe this will breathe some new life. Breathe some new life into the LeBlanc fans. And get them out there on Summoner's Rift. So, that, ladies and gentlemen... Oh! I almost forgot about the most important part. The most amazing thing that a digital artist can do, and that is blurring stuff. Blurring things to make them look cool. So let's talk about that too, because I know you guys looked at this and you want to know how I did that. Okay. So I will teach you the ways. I will teach you the ways of blurring. So take a look at this. See the differences between here and here? See what the blur actually does? It really helps to add, like, it also creates more of a focal point because you keep the face nice and crisp, but then things like, say, the arm that are reaching out towards you, or things that are by the edges, or things that are further away, such as the cape. See how blurring those really helps to create more of a sense of depth, and it's just a really cool thing to do. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, so this is at the very end of your piece, because you're going to create a sticker, which is basically merge all of your layers together, right? But make sure you duplicate them. Make sure you have your group right here, and let me zoom out a little bit so that way you don't muck this up. Okay, look at here. This is my group 3. This is all the layers, okay? Before you do this, hit Control-J, duplicate that group first, and then flatten it, okay? Then flatten it, and then you're ready to go. Just in case you mess it all up, you got to go back. Yeah, that would be terrible if you couldn't. Okay, so here's what I like to do for my blurring techniques. Is I like to select all the things. Oh, whoops. I like to select all the things that'll be blurred just a little bit, right? So let's say like the cape, and this can actually be done fairly, I don't know, sloppily, but that's not the right word. I don't know. I select things that are all around the edge. So things kind of like this. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? Something like that. And we definitely want to blur this back part of the cape there as well as there. So that's a good start, okay? So things that are coming close to you need to be blurred. Things that are on the edge can be blurred. Things that are in the background can be blurred. Keep the face, though, in focus. So here's what you do now. You're going to go to Select, then Modify, then Feather. And the shortcut is, of course, Shift F6. And I like to feather my radius by about, depending on your resolution, most of the time like 60 pixels works pretty well. And what this does is it's not going to really do anything to your, it's going to do something interesting to your selection. It's going to look like it rounded, but really it's kind of created like a feather. Think of it as like a gradient of this effect. So that way, because here's what I'll show you what happens if you don't do that. So if you go straight to blur and then Gaussian blur, and then you blur the stuff in the background, you're like, hey, that looks really nice, right? But then when you deselect it, do you see how you can see those hard edges? See, I can see exactly where you selected. This is where a feather comes in handy. So let's go ahead and do that. Shift F6. Shift F6 that stuff. And then let's go ahead and do the blur, okay? So let's go ahead and blur it. I usually do like, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want it to look like this, right? Keep it easy. Keep it kind of around like 4 pixels. That should be good, right? See, now the feather makes it so it's a nice soft transition back into your work, right? And now you have a cool effect. You have some cool effects already starting. And then what I'll do is you can blur things more than once. Like say, okay, now let's go ahead and do a second blur pass on the things that are really far in the background. Let's do this part and this part again. Let's go back to blur, blur it again. Blur it even more. Boom, there you go. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you do it. That's how you add depth to your pieces with blur. And then you are good to go. All right, and I think that's about it. But just in case, let's go ahead and finish up this time lapse. That is it. Yep. All righty then, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to go ahead and end it. So thank you guys so much for joining me on YouTube. Thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. My name is Kienan Lafferty. What? Oh, I'm totally forgetting something. I'm forgetting sponsors. Thank you so much to my amazing sponsors. Laura Bashir, Captain Big Butt, and David Chiariello. These guys are amazing. Keep the lights running at night. And of course, my sponsors of the past. Thank you to these people right here. The show would not be the same without you. Last but not least, I would like to say that this PSD is going to be available on Patreon. So if you would like to check it out, you can both take a look at the old version as well as the new version. If you want to check those out, just click on this picture right here. Take you over to the Patreon. You can submit or support the show. You can submit your pledges and support the show and get PSDs, as well as all kinds of other cool rewards. So yeah, if you want to check that out, click the picture right there. And the last thing that I want to say is if you guys are not on IMSI yet, go there now, people. Head on over to IMSI and join the community. It is in beta right now, so I only have 100 spots left available. But yes, that address is right there, imsi.com/KNKL. So get on there. Get on there, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to end it. So yes, thank you once again. You guys take care. I'll see you next week, and until that time, you guys stay awesome. See ya.